All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Rich Mind podcast. And today, I've got a couple quick questions for you here at the very beginning that I want to propose to you to just ponder for just a minute before we get into this awesome episode. I've got a great guest lined up for us. He's on standby right now, and we'll bring him on in just a second. But first off is on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your happiness in your daily life. 10 being you're the most happy every day, and 1 being you're struggling. You're not sure exactly where to be happy, how to be happy. Just rate yourself just quickly, 1 to 10 on that scale. And then I want you to think about, what if your life could be better? What if you could increase your score? I don't care what the score was for yourself. We're all different. But what if you could take that score and increase it exponentially? I mean, move it from, if you're a 5, move it to an 8, 9, or 10. What if you're a 10 and you could take it up to a 15 or 20? Who knows? It's all possible. And that's why I brought on this fantastic guest today. And we're going to have a great conversation about happiness. Today, I brought on Matt O'Neill. Matt is a happiness expert whose work has impacted over 100,000 people worldwide. He's the author of The Good Mood Revolution, Ignite the Power of Consciousness Happiness. Inside of the book, he gives you a clear guidance to retrain your mind and embrace a happier life, which is super cool. We'll get into the book and talk about all the details of how you can do that for yourself. He's also a fellow podcaster under the same title, The Good Mood Revolution, and we'll talk about that as well. He's also a successful entrepreneur and family man with his wife and 4 beautiful children. And from what I understand, you're coming to us from down in South Carolina. Is that right, Matt?
Randy, what's up, man? Yeah, I'm in sunny Charleston, South Carolina, heaven on earth.
Heaven on earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Love it. I don't think I've ever been to Charleston, but yeah, maybe one of these days we'll have to get down there.
Well, if you want to visit heaven, you'd come to Charleston.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, that was, like I said, we're going to talk about happiness today. We were just having a little bit of a pre-call before we hit record today. Super excited about this conversation. One of the topics, as far as the pivots that I've made within the podcast, I want to talk about health. I want to talk about wealth, and I want to talk about legacy. And we talked about how we can incorporate some of the tactics and tricks and things like that we're going to talk about today to become happier in our life, to achieve more from within. I talk about winning within on the podcast, and we're going to talk a lot about those things today here on this episode. So I'm super excited to have you, man. Let's have a great chat. Let's talk about it.
Dude, I am so excited to be here. And yes, happiness affects our health, happiness affects our wealth, and happiness affects our legacy, all 3 in a profound way. And a lot of times we kind of think it's either or. Like, either I can just sit around and be happy and content, do whatever I want and be lazy, or I could be super disciplined, hard on myself, and have health and wealth and legacy, but I can't be happy at the same time. And that is a huge misconception. I believed it myself. And I believed in this idea of sacrifice. Like, I have to sacrifice my joy now. I'll just grind. I'll get into this workout. I'm going to grind in this workout. It's going to suck, but no pain, no gain, right? Let me I'll just endure it. I'll grit my teeth, and then I'll be healthy one day. Or I'm going to grind at work. I'm just going to fricking grind. I'm going to do things I hate to do so I can make a bunch of money. And then with all that money, then I'll be able to be happy one day. Or with my legacy, I'm just going to grind, and I'm going to have all these kids. And then 4 kids is a lot of kids. I'm going to change all the diapers. And then one day these kids will be my legacy, and their kids will be my legacy. But I can't enjoy the process at all. And it's a complete lie. I know the book, we talk about the ego and the higher self. These are lies of the ego. And the ego is always trying to manipulate us to do things that increase our survival chances. And it does not care about happiness whatsoever. And it actually says, hey, I'll give you happiness down the road in the future if you just do these things that improve survival chances. And that's the idea of sacrifice. We don't have to fall for that lie.
So it's a lie that I think we all believe. When I say we all, let me just put myself in that, right? You believe that that's the way it should be. We talked briefly, and folks, if you listen to any of the episodes, I've talked about how my father has passed. Both of my parents have passed early in life. And I just remember growing up, my father was always pushing towards this future moment, this retirement moment where he could then become happy, where he then could do the things he wanted to do, versus being happy in the moment. Before we go there, let's rewind a little bit. I want everybody to get to know you a little bit better. So let's put a pin in that question. Let me come back to that. But I would love to take a couple seconds here at the very beginning of the episode. We jumped right into the content right away, which I love because I'm super excited about the conversation. But let's get everybody a chance to get to know you a little bit better. Your story, where this fascination with happiness and discovering how to become happy in your own life, and how you're trying to teach people how to do that. Let's go there first. Let's talk about Matt and how you discovered this path of happiness.
Yeah, before I was born, I came to Earth with a mission to teach people how to be happier. And if you know, it's really I can't remember who said it, but it's the two greatest moments in your life are when you recognize that what your mission is, and then when you start to follow it. And when I was just a young boy, like I remember looking in the mirror at such a young age, maybe 5 years old, and I would have this insight that my job was to teach the world how to feel better. And it was such an odd little thing, right? And it was in these, the flashes come back to you over time. In the moment you could just kind of disregard, like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. I don't know where that came from, but it kept coming back. It was consistent. They would come to me in my teens when I certainly wasn't happy. There was a lot of angst, a lot of bad mood emotions. And then in my 20s, when I was struggling with daily drug use, daily alcohol use, and really wasn't probably at the depths of the darkness that I could get to, the dark night of the soul, I again would get these nudges. Hey, you are here to teach the world how to be happier. And I'm like, that is so freaking weird because I'm not happy at all. And then as I started to heal all of the darkness and the pain that really came from generational trauma that I talk about in the beginning of the book, from really unintentional accidents, orphanage. My grandmother was an orphan, and then she was given away by her mom. And so then she felt she was unlovable, but her mom was doing the best she could. She's a 20-year-old widow with a baby, and you can't get a job in 1904 if you're a woman and you have a baby. Who's going to take care of the baby? So she had to give the baby away to give the baby the best chance of a life. And then she had to then go meet a new man who could take care of her. And this is just the way it had to be for my grandmother's development. But innocently enough, my grandmother then as a young child says, I'm unlovable. I'm unlovable. My dad abandoned me when he died of tuberculosis. My mom abandoned me when she gave me away to her parents to raise. And then that lie that she was unlovable became a core focus of her life. I'm not worthy of love. And then, of course, she had my father, and then he was taught, you're not worthy of love, because my grandmother, his mom didn't believe it. And so then what did my dad do when I was a kid? He said, you're not worthy of love, because he didn't believe he was worthy of love. And so we just passed this kind of lie down the line. And so that really was the core of where all of my darkness came from, was this generational trauma. I innocently wore the cloak of I'm unworthy of love, just like all of my ancestors had worn it. And they had innocently worn it because they had been taught that too, and just kind of innocently believed these things. But when we believe these lies, we do some really terrible things. Right? When I didn't believe I was worthy of love, I cheated on my girlfriends, because how could they love me? I'm unlovable. So then my behavior was unlovable. I wasn't unlovable, but I had behavior that made it so that they couldn't love me. And I'm pushing them away because our internal beliefs determine our outward actions. But I didn't realize I was being run by programs, and that I was in fact in control of the programs, that my little 5-year-old self had determined I was unlovable because my dad told me I was, and I believed him. I made the decision to believe it. Well, then now that I'm an adult, I can also make the decision to believe something different, which is I'm totally worthy of love. And if I believe that, guess what? Then when I meet my wife, I'm going to make sure I don't cheat on her, that I'm completely faithful, and that in fact, I'm going to go above and beyond to make sure she knows how much she's admired. And when I do that, then she admires me in the same way. And I have this really beautiful marriage that's built on a foundation of love, because I'm not pushing her away and forcing her, even though she loves me completely. If I continue to cheat on her, she would eventually have to say, I can't take the pain you're putting me through anymore. I love you, but I can't endure what you're doing to me. And I would then prove the truth that I'm unlovable. but we have to heal this. We have to heal these bad moods. There's just 8 bad moods I talk about in my book. And the first one, what I'm talking about now, this wound of rejection, is shame. We have to all heal that wound in order to have a beautiful, happy life.
So it's those core wounds. That's the term that I put on them when I discovered core wounds for myself. So the unlovable, not worthy. I've considered myself the not worthy part. I feel like I was loved growing up. My mom was fantastic. My father's where I had my trouble with, meaning he was very tough on me. Meaning, and I'm sure, and I'm probably tough on my son as well. Riley, if you're listening to me, I apologize. But at the same time, the idea is that I always never felt like I could ever live up to his expectations, whether it was within sports, whether it was within just being, right? Just day-to-day activities. That was where I struggled, which created this, like you called it, a program in my mind where everything that I tried to attempt to do in my outside world, whether it be with school or even with relationships or with my career, I never felt like I was worthy for that next achievement. I just always struggled with that forever and ever and ever. And when I first found out and heard about this core wound, it allowed me then to, like you said, make a different decision to go to work to try to make that better. So the question with all of that in there is at what point in your life did you realize that this past programming that you, like you said, it's generational. It's from one generation to the next. And if you don't take the conscious action to stop it, it's going to continue to the next generation. At what point in your life, you mentioned about maybe some turmoil there in your 20s. Now you've been married and have some children of your own, but where and when did you figure out that having this conscious choice and making a different choice was going to impact your life in a positive way?
Yeah, a very clear moment. I was 25 years old and I was reading a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And of course, with the Rich Mind podcast, probably every listener is familiar with that book. For me, of course, I was attracted to, making a lot of money. That sounds great, but the book changed everything for me because he said, everything is created twice, once inside your mind and then once in the external world. So if you don't like your external world, it was all created by your own thinking. So all you have to do is change your thinking and you change your world. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. Every single thing in my life is being created by me. All of the problems, I couldn't see that I thought I was a victim, that people were being mean to me, that they were being rude to me, that I was unworthy, that's really just because of the way I'm thinking. And if I changed the way I'm thinking, it all would change. And that was like an epiphany. It was a wake up. That book, I was just entranced. It was almost like an enlightening moment where I heard the right message at the right time and I started to shift. It didn't happen in a moment. The moment was a wake up of I'm doing this to myself. And then it took, probably 2 decades of work from that point to go in and figure out what are these programs that are creating the things I don't want in my life and how could I change those programs. I want to talk about your dad and generational trauma. So the only person that would say you're not worthy is somebody who doesn't feel worthy. The only one that would say you're not living up to my expectations is someone who's not living up to their own expectations. So as hard as he may have been on us, like our parents, as hard as they may have been on us, they're twice as hard on themselves. And ultimately, this is one of the things that can lead us to some very good emotions about people that were tough on us, of compassion, is to say, because my dad was crazy hard father to have growing up. Ultimately, I got to a place of compassion when I finally saw the truth that he wasn't hard on me because I wasn't good enough. He was hard on me because he didn't believe he was good enough. And then my heart just went out to him. Once I healed it and I finally knew I was this amazing human being that was always had great intention, and maybe my results weren't always there, but my intentions were always great. Then I could then see my dad from a different light because he didn't have that same knowing that he also was a great human being and worthy of love and worthy of admiration. He never believed it. And so then I came to him in a new light. I took him to meditation class. It was just me and him and this meditation teacher who is a beautiful man named Muni Natarajan. And Muni said one of his favorite lines is, "You're perfect. You just don't know it yet."
Hmm.
And my dad, in a very humble moment, which was very rare, said, "I've never really felt that perfect." And I was like, wow, what? And that was growth for him too, to admit that in front of people that he never felt that perfect. And I'm like, man, it's really cool that in his later years, he was starting to grow. He was starting to grow softer and grow into more of a beautiful soul that, you know, in his younger years, he never really had a chance to grow like that. So sometimes don't ever give up on somebody either, because they can grow even in their later years.
We can all get better. I tell that to my family all the time. I'm not perfect yet. I'm working on that, right? Working towards that. But
You
at the same
are.
time,
Mooney would say the opposite, Randy.
well,
He'd
I
say,
had
hey,
a feeling you were going to correct me on
you're
that. That's why I was trying to
perfect.
think through that
You're
statement
perfect.
before.
You just don't know it yet. You're
I just don't
perfect.
yet.
You're
So I'm in
perfect.
the.
You just don't know it yet. And that's really a beautiful knowing, when we can totally embody that knowing that we are on our perfect journey. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing ever wrong. Sure, we make mistakes. We might hurt somebody's feelings. We might say the wrong thing. We might choose the wrong thing, but they're all necessary mistakes on a path of perpetual growth and learning. We're eternal. So it's all about eternal growth, and there's no destination. So we're always on our perfect growth path for us, regardless of what we've done or what we've said or who we've hurt or how bad we've been. It has all just been our perfect education to continue to become better and better.
And mine's been about 2 decades as well. You mentioned about 2 decades worth of self-education, getting better. I also have heard you on another episode, you mentioned about how there's no ceiling, there's no limit to the personal growth you can from the personal development stage.
Never.
And that's where, for me, that's where it's so exciting that when you feel like you're becoming better, you can even do it even better. Right? And I guess that's maybe where that comment came about, not being perfect yet. I just know that I'm striving to become and even a better human, better father, better friend, better podcaster, better, you put a label on it. Doesn't really matter what it is. I'm just trying to become better for those who are in my proximity. You mentioned Think and Grow Rich, Lead the Field. I've got it up here on my stand up here. That's why I have it up there. It was a huge wake up call, like you said, for myself, because within that program, he talks about you become what you think about. That's what he talks about in Lead the Field. And when I heard that, just like what you said with Think and Grow Rich, it was just like, wow. I mean, it was just like, as simple as that sounds coming out of my mouth and coming out of Earl's in that recording, it was just like, that was so profound to even think that I had control over my exterior environment based on the thoughts that I was feeding, whether it was, taking things in or obviously what was going on in my mind at any given time. And that's where I went to work. I went to work on me as much as I possibly could, as quickly as I could. And I started seeing some fantastic results to the point where I'm getting better every day, better with my family, trying to break that bind of, like you said, not feeling worthy. And like you said, and I think you're correct. My father I know he didn't feel worthy either. Yeah. So now that you say that,
someone who feels fully worthy would never make someone else feel unworthy. And Randy, I do want to just work on the language a little bit, because our language creates our reality. That word better is a tough word. It has an implication that you're not fully whole and wonderful and perfect and pristine and stainless and incredible exactly as you are. We're going to continue to grow, but we can grow also while embracing our wholeness and perfection in this moment. And there's a really important reason for happiness and for just living in love. We'll become better human beings to other people when we embrace this like reality that I'm perfect as I am, and I'm going to continue to grow because that's the path of all humans. But I'm like fully embracing my incredible, awesome nature right now. It is self-love. I can fully love myself as I have flaws, imperfections, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. If I just fully love all of my humanity, the parts of the humanity that are hard to love, if I can love those, then I can extend that love to my children as they do some things that like we want to scratch our head at and say, oh man, that's going to cause some pain. Or, hey, that hurt me, which you said really hurt me. But, man, I love you completely on your journey. You're perfect the way that you are right now. Of course, you're going to keep growing because we all do. But man, I just love you in your humanity. This is really a path of enlightenment. And to become enlightened isn't to not have anger anymore. It isn't to not feel shame or guilt or any of the 8 bad moods that I talk about. It is to love the ego so profoundly, to love our humanity so profoundly that we just love it to death. And it no longer is a problem for us. We're like, oh man, that's cute. That's cute. You want to get angry and stomp your feet right now? That's really nice. It's kind of like a little dog, right? Like I love my dog so much. And sometimes my dog, messes in the house. Sometimes he does. He's old. He's 16 and a half copper, but I love him so much. And, and that's kind of the way I see the ego is sometimes it makes a mess. Sometimes it actually shits the bed. And you're like, oh, that's cute. That's cute. You want to feel that way right now. You're just so lovable being a human.
So that's where you talked about the ego. Maybe that's kind of where we can pivot the conversation a little bit, go into talking about the differences between your higher self versus your ego. Mm-hmm. Maybe put some context in there. Describe what each one of those are, and maybe some ways that we can internally, right, within our own minds and our own thinking, determine kind of which one is kind of speaking to us at that particular moment, whatever situation we're in at that moment.
Yeah, they both talk to us. It's very important to get better and better and better at discerning, is this message coming from the egoic mind, or is this message coming from my higher self or my heart center or God, right? Which of these 2 messages? I get asked that question a lot. How do I know where it's coming from? We know by taking action and making mistakes and figuring out, oh man, that one was a painful action. And that definitely was coming from the ego's desire for more gain and harm and revenge and those types of things. And then this action I took was definitely guided from my heart or my higher self or from God or the universe or whatever force you want to say is guiding us, because then that created a bunch of beauty and harmony in the world, in my life and the life of others. So that's how we know the fruits of our actions will tell us. Jesus has a parable about that. From your fruits, you'll know them. The fruits of our actions will tell us if it was a heart-centered higher self action and it came from a higher place, or if it's a rotten fruit and it created pain and suffering in our life or someone else's life. We're like, oh, okay, that came from a pretty selfish, egoic place. The more we discern our own actions through trial and error and see what the fruits look like, the more we'll be in tune with, oh, okay, I could feel where that one came from. That one came from my heart. That's beautiful. And I say, oh man, I thought that one was what I was supposed to do, but it really was coming from a desire to conquer and be more and prove that I'm better than other people. And it ended up creating some harm. So we start to be able to figure out which of these 2 it's coming from. But I got the first glimpse into what it is to be a separate soul that has an ego in a human body when I was reading the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And he talks about how he's sitting on the couch and he notices he has an inner roommate that's commenting on everything. And he's like, this inner roommate has to like make comments about everything. And he's like, I could hear what the inner roommate was saying, the mind, but I didn't have to necessarily believe that was true or even attached to those thoughts. I was just noticing that this inner roommate has to comment on everything. Well, that inner roommate that has to comment on everything, our thinking mind, is the egoic mind, the one that notices the thoughts that come in. That's our higher self. And I don't know if I talk about it in the book or not, but I usually use this analogy to help us understand that we're not the egoic mind, is that we have a heart and its job is to beat. And, I'd say, Randy, can you tell your heart to stop beating for 2 minutes?
I can physically, but I don't think it's going to listen to me.
It doesn't listen to us, right? And so our heart's job is to beat, and it just is. It's just to beat. Well, we have a brain, a human mind, an egoic mind, its job is to feed us thoughts that help us survive. It's the reason that the species has survived for millions of years. Can you tell your mind to stop producing thoughts for, let's say, 5 minutes?
I think some of us, including myself, wish we could at moments, right? When the chatter's just going off like crazy.
We can't. And so that was actually my misconception about meditation early on, is that I thought I was supposed to stop the mind from thinking. And I'm like, I can't do this. I can't not have thoughts. And then some great meditators would be like, I can not have thoughts for minutes and just be in this theta state. And I'm like, I can't. I'm not able to. So maybe there is some high master that can do that. But what I can do is I can notice that the mind's job is to beat thoughts one after another, just like the heart's job is to beat blood one after another. And I can notice that this mind is thinking these thoughts, but it's not me, because how could I be the one thinking the thoughts if I can't stop them? It's thinking thoughts and I'm noticing them. And now what's beautiful is that now we're the higher self. So you have to believe in eternity. And this is just a prerequisite if you want to be really, really happy. If you don't believe in eternity, it's really difficult to be super happy. You can be happy enough, but if you think you're going to die and go in the ground and that's it's really scary. But if you have a view of eternity, then you're like, okay, so this eternal soul joins with a human body and starts to love it and become one with it. And that's when we're born, and when we're in the womb, we join this eternal soul, which is our higher self, joins with this human mind. And then we start to be conditioned by the world that we are this human mind. And then hopefully we wake up from it and notice, wait a minute, I'm not this human mind. I'm this eternal being that happens to be joined with a human mind. And now I can not resent it and say, you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't. I can just work with it and say, oh, okay, you're experiencing sadness right now. Well, let me hold you. Let me hug you. This is a really hard thing to go through. But we don't have to lose ourselves in the emotion of sadness, because we know that we're actually like in the world, but we're not really of the world. We have this body, but it's not who we are. Ultimately, this body will wither and die, but our eternal soul will continue on and continue to have more growth and more adventures. So that's the dichotomy between our higher self and our egoic self. But every single time we listen to the egoic self and we think that it's a good idea to get revenge or to be competitive or to act superior to somebody or to do something for our own gain, ultimately it creates suffering for us and others.
And that's where the non-happiness comes from, right? The lack of happiness, maybe that's maybe a better way to put it. Is when that egoic mind is in control versus that higher self.
And it's always our choice. That's why I say happiness is a choice. Once we see it, we're like, oh, I don't have to choose to believe that thought that person has really harmed me and I've been violated. I don't have to believe that I'm a victim. I can feel that the egoic mind wants me to go down that path and like get super invested in this thought pattern, but I don't have to choose to believe it. I can stay in my high self and be so empowered and just love everything about this current situation so much. I can rise above it and stay empowered and choose something different. I can choose to be responsible and happy and joyful right now, and then go make like crazy, incredible things happen, because I'm not trying to get all consumed with this revenge thinking that ultimately is a dead end. Like I could just go create a company that makes $1 billion tomorrow if I feel like it.
Okay, let's do that. And that's kind of the whole point. Once you take control, once you realize that it is within your control, that's when you can start making, so like you said, some major pivots in your life to the point where your life today or in the future, and it could be a relatively short period of time. We talked about being a couple of decades for each of us, but I saw some significant changes relatively quickly as you start going down this path of realizing that your thoughts and your ideas, understanding the ego versus your higher self, really putting these things into practice, into thought for yourself, within yourself. We talked about meditation. That's where, when you do that and start doing that for yourself, you're going to start seeing life in a different way. And for myself, I'm speaking for myself, but it sounds like from your same thing from you, Matt, which is that when you start doing that, everything around you starts to begin to change, which is where it's different, because I believe we're brought up to think that we have to force things on our exterior world to get them to change, when in reality it's a reflection of what's going on inside of me. that allows me to show up, have this conversation with you, go out, have a great conversation, or be, good with my family. Any interactions in my outside exterior 3D world is a reflection of what's going on inside of me, which understanding this higher self ego is a major piece of that. So as we go into, let's talk about the different the moods. You talk about conquering the bad moods within your book. There's 8 bad moods, and then obviously choosing to look into the good moods, the 8 good moods. I'd love for you to go into that as far as discussing each one. You don't have to go into great detail on each one, but maybe pick out 1 or 2 that are the most impactful that you feel that the audience could really take away today and really start to impact their own personal life really immediately as soon as they turn off this episode.
Yeah, no, I love talking about the 8 bad moods. The 8 bad moods of the ego are the only things that keep us from happiness. And what's great is there's only 8 of them. And
That's
it's
true.
it's a small number. And once we understand, and they're completely universal for all humanity. So anyone who's caught in the emotion of, let's say, fear or anxiety, it is experienced exactly the same for all of us. It manifests in the same way. It has the same thought patterns. It's basically like now the emotion of fear and anxiety is taken over us, and we're speaking from the emotion. We're no longer speaking from ourselves. So the 8 negative moods are the wound of rejection or shame, which we talked about. Then the wound of judgment or guilt, where we want to judge and condemn others. And then that's also our own guilt. This is kind of what we were going into with your dad, is this wound. The next is the wound of overwhelm or hopelessness, where we just kind of feel like it's all up to us and there's so much to do, and then life kind of feels meaningless a little bit. This is also where depression ends up happening, is in this emotion, super heavy. It's a really heavy emotion. We need help out of that one. So if you ever feel completely overwhelmed and hopeless and like life is losing its meaning, you have to get help. There's no other way. You have to get help, because it's not. Life is never without meaning. It is in that emotion. When the emotion is talking, we believe that life has no meaning. But when we get out of that emotional signature, like life is so beautiful and grand and incredible, and we're just like awestruck at how magical it all is. But we have to get out of that emotion. The next is the wound of loss or sadness. And change is inevitable. Every single thing is changing, and we're getting older. Our bodies are getting older. People are dying. You've lost your parents. I just lost my dad not too long ago. Loss is inevitable. Change is inevitable. And of course, when we lose something we care about, we feel sad. But the gift in that, and again, our eternal soul is eternal, but the gift that we get here is that everything's impermanent, which means it's so much more special. Like, it actually teaches us to cherish people in our life so much deeper and so much more profoundly when we know loss could happen at any moment, that it actually makes like our love so much more intense. So it's really beautiful when we get to like the other side of the coin of loss, is how much we really love. And so loss can teach us a lot about really high emotions. After loss, there comes fear and anxiety, which also can be helpful. All these moods can be helpful. We just don't want to live in them. From fear and anxiety, typically, like worry is a lot of women will tend to be in this emotion. I'm not being sexist here. Men, of course, I get fearful and anxious too. But I've seen that will be a go-to for many spouses, women of entrepreneurs and people that are on the entrepreneurial path. And entrepreneurs tend to be more leaning into the next 3 bad moods, which are lust, this never-ending pursuit of more, that you're like, oh, I'll just, once I conquer that, once I get this achievement, once I make that million or get these investments, once I do that, then I'll be happy. We talked about that at the very beginning of the episode. The interesting thing about delaying our happiness is that we are actually training ourselves to be unhappy in this moment. But in the future, guess what? We'll be in this moment again. And so our neural pathways are trained to always delay happiness. And so we never actually are able to be happy when we achieve the thing, because we never learn how to be happy in the only moment we get to live, which is now. Happiness resides in the now. So we have to learn the skill of being happy now while we're going after big goals, so that we're happy now and then tomorrow and then the next day. And then when we achieve the big goal, we're happy because our neural pathways now know how to be happy in the moment. And if we never learn that skill, doesn't matter what we achieve, we'll never be happy. And then after that is a really common entrepreneurial emotion of anger. That we're like, sometimes entrepreneurs will use anger to like motivate ourselves to make change and get better. It's just, we can't be happy and angry at the same time. And it can be really destructive to live in that emotion. And the final bad mood really kind of seems like a positive one in a lot of ways, and it's pride. We can get super arrogant and prideful. In a lot of ways, feeling proud of ourselves is a huge accomplishment. If we can go from like the lowest bad mood emotions to eventually feeling proud of ourselves, that can feel like so much progress. And it really is. It's really positive progress, but it's still a negative emotion. Because when we're in that competitive state, I used to pride myself. I'd say, I am so competitive. And I thought that was really great, right? Because competitive people are winners. And I was a winner and I was always achieving, but I wasn't happy. And in this loss in the emotion of pride, we think, oh, okay, I can either be super happy or I could be super successful. So I'd rather be super successful. So I'll sacrifice my happiness. But that is a complete lie. Actually, we can get into, once we move beyond the ego, and pride's the pinnacle of the ego, we move into the 8 positive emotions of our higher self, which starts with humility and humbleness. Then we start to realize, oh, okay, I can be crazy successful and crazy happy at the same time. Like they both can coincide as long as I just let go of all the egoic rewards that pride or competitiveness would have to offer me. And I choose to just have humility and humbleness. And I no longer have to get into these pissing matches with other people about who's right and who's wrong. And I just don't even need to play that game. I just need to be myself and then go after what I feel from my heart called to do. I can have way more success because I'm not dragged down by all of this drama that pride creates. So we think being prideful and arrogant and cocky and competitive, it will push us to great heights, but it's actually like a giant weight holding us back. As soon as we cut it and we humble ourselves, we can achieve 10 times more because we're unencumbered by the drama that it brings with it. And so then the 8 positive moods we can get into, but I'll just stop there and let you kind of dig into any of those that you had a question about.
Yeah. So the one that's coming to my mind, like you referenced, we were talking about it. I started to go down that road at the very beginning with my father, right? I never got the impression that he was happy in the moment. He was always searching for this future destination, this next goal, this next achievement, this next whatever, which I believe now looking back and, you know, obviously as I've gotten older with my own children in my own life, him not being able to be happy in the moment was keeping him from, like you said, he thought he was trying to achieve. He was pushing, grinding. And I think a lot of us fall into that trap, thinking of happiness being this future destination versus it being right now. You know, so just now, literally now. I say now, I mean now. Like you need to be happy now in this moment, in this conversation.
It's the only time we can be. It's the only time we ever live.
That's all we have control over is now, not the past and not the future. So help me. If someone is out there and they're recognizing literally at this moment that they're suffering from that same thoughts, those same ideas of, like you say, being competitive and grinding and pushing and going for this future destination goal, and realizing that, okay, once I get there, you hear about the billionaires that are unhappy all the time, or the millionaires that they finally get to the goal, but that they're miserable at the end of the day. And that's like, that's too bad. Let's help people unpack that. You can still achieve, but then be happy at the same time. Do you have anything that people can do to try to get their thoughts collected? Separation of that self, internal self versus the ego, and try to, you know, decipher between the two to try to find that happiness while they are trying to achieve greater things in their life.
Absolutely. Yep. And I set big goals and I achieved big goals. And when I was living in a lot of the 8 bad moods, I also set big goals and achieved big goals just without joy. You know, maybe for a week or a couple of days or maybe even a month, when I achieved the giant goal, I would allow myself to feel like elated about it but then I just go right back into, all right, what's next? Let's grind and not be happy again. Now I'm setting giant goals, achieving giant goals, but I'm happy in the moment that I'm setting them, in the moment that I'm striving, and in the moment that they come or don't come. It really doesn't affect happiness, because happiness is a skill that's accessed now and now and now. And that's the only moment we ever live is right now.
That's why I wanted to point that it's now,
It's
now,
just
right?
now. It's
So
this
people get tired
moment.
of hearing, yeah, exactly.
And 2 years from now, it'll also be now.
Right.
In that moment, it'll be now. And so it's like, if we don't know the skill of if we know the skill of how to be frustrated and discontent now, then 2 years from now, we'll also be really good at that pathway of frustration and discontent as well, no matter what we've achieved. And if a path to destruction, like marriages falling apart, children not wanting to talk to you, like true unhappiness or health problems come from emotional discontent. So if we want to just like avoid destruction, we have to learn how to be happy now while we're achieving and chasing giant things. So the easiest practice to do on this is gratitude. Nothing works better than gratitude. We all hear about it. Well, I'm sure there's no one listening that hasn't heard to count their gratitudes every day. If we're not doing it on a consistent basis multiple times a day, then we don't truly know what gratitude is. And so gratitude is not something that you know of. Gratitude is something that you practice. And it's a practice because we can never perfect it. We can never be grateful. We can never get to the top of the gratitude mountain. It's a mountain without a top. There's always more and more and more to be grateful for. So I start my day with a gratitude step. When I get out of bed, my first foot hits the floor and I say thank. And my second foot hits the floor and I say you. And the very first words out of my mouth are thank you. And I'm walking through the house saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't even know what I'm saying thank you about. It's not even a conscious thing anymore at this point. I taped the word thank you to the floor where I get out of bed every day just to start to say words of gratitude. We can only be grateful in the now. And when we're grateful in the now, we are happy. You cannot be both grateful and hateful at the same time. But if we're hateful, we can't be grateful. So these two things can't exist at the same time. So I literally start my day saying thank you. And then when I get my coffee, I think of 3 brand new things that I've never said I was grateful for that I can be grateful for today. And this is so crucial. We can't just write down 3 things that we're grateful for and say the same 3 things. I'm grateful for my wife, for my children, for my health. Well, then it becomes boring and it's a chore and it's no longer impactful. If every single day you have to say 3 new things I've never said before, you're like, shoot, man, I've been doing this now for 100 days. I've ran out of things. What else after those 100 things? I literally can't think of anything else that's new. Then you start to wake up to gratitude and you're like, oh, okay. I could literally be grateful for absolutely every single experience that ever happens. I could be grateful for the challenge that like really pissed me off because I had to grow my compassion for people. Like that challenge like turned into a really beautiful thing for me. I can be grateful that yesterday my wife came home safely from her trip. That's not a guarantee. That her coming home safely yesterday, I'm going to write that in my gratitude journal. I'm grateful that she came home safely yesterday. Oh, okay. How beautiful. Now today, I'm not taking her for granted. I'm not taking my life for granted or her life for granted. I'm grateful in this moment that she is alive. And then I can be grateful. I went and played this is me, my life. I went and played basketball this morning and man, I got my butt kicked.
and something to be grateful for.
and I'm like, and so how can I be grateful that I got my butt kicked in basketball? Well, I'm grateful that I'm in such a high level game that these guys are such fierce competitors and such great basketball players that it's going to elevate me to continue to improve and improve my game. I'm grateful I get to play in such a high level game, right? Where I can get now an ungrateful mind that hasn't trained itself how to be grateful would look at that game where I lost all but one game today and focus on how I'm not good enough. And that was terrible. And I played awful and I should have hit more shots and shoulda, like all this other stuff. A grateful mind takes the exact same experience, but because it is always looking for things to be grateful for, because every single day I have to write down 3 new things, it starts to be grateful for everything. And so as I'm leaving the game, instead of my head being held low, I'm high-fiving guys. I'm like, man, you played great today. Like, wow, I was really impressed with the way you played. And if they judge me that I didn't play well enough, that's their own guilt and judgment, right? That has nothing to do with me. Again, compassion. If their mind is ugly and they want to say ugly things about me, I'm just going to have compassion for somebody whose mind is ugly, that they're living in suffering. I'm not. I'm living in gratitude and admiration. Like, wow, you played really great. I'm proud of you. I'm like, that was awesome. And I aspire to continue to improve, right? The gratitude is the super easy practice. And the other place, and just to give a very concrete way, we can also bring more gratitude into our lives. Every time before I eat anything, I say thank you. Very simple. It's like I'm attaching gratitude to something I do, which is eating meals. You hear people pray. I pray and I say thank you. Like there are 1,000 people who are food insecure right now in my town. 1,000 people that don't know where their next meal is coming from. I'm not one of those people, thankfully, today. And so I'm going to say thank you that there's food on my plate. This is the easiest practice on how to change our mindset.
Love that. So the gratitude practice, having incorporated one for myself, has been probably by far the biggest change for myself. I like the idea of doing new ones every day. I honestly had not really thought of it that way. I try, so for example, before we hopped on this recording, I'm out for a walk, didn't take anything with me, no devices, no nothing. And I'm just listening to the birds. It's a beautiful day today, spring, the air was cool. And I'm just thanking all of that. I can hear the cars driving by. The trees are starting to change. I know fall's coming. So those are the thoughts that I'm having. But the point I wanted to try to make with that was that it's become a habit. I'm not perfect at it. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, because based on the conversation we said earlier, I'm trying to become even better at it, but I've become better at noticing things that prior to becoming awake or becoming more aware of these things in my surroundings, I wouldn't even have seen them before. And that's where that gratitude practice is. I agree wholeheartedly that that's been a super impactful thing for me. I journal. I try to every single day. And that's part of that journaling, is I try to express gratitude for whatever's going on.
Randy, that's a beautiful practice, man. And I want to really unpack what's so amazing about what you're doing. The phone takes us away from the now. Leaving the devices at home and being in nature connects us with what is now. You hear a bird. The bird is chirping now. That is the now. Like you're so in tune with what's happening in this moment. Sunshine, being outside, being in nature. These are some of the happiest things we possibly can do, being unconnected from devices. So the other practice, other than gratitude, that brings us into higher states of happiness is presence. In this walk, this gratitude walk that you're doing is almost like a meditation. It's a walking meditation, and it is so beautiful. It's so profound. These are so simple, right? But the mind would say, the egoic mind would say, how is that helping us be successful? How is this walk? I don't have time for that walk today. I've got 10,000 emails. I've got different sales calls I need to make. There are plans I have to get to, right? We don't have to. And so today I don't have time for the walk. We have to listen again. We have to listen to the egoic mind. It's not the truth. It's just feeding us thoughts. That's its job. It wants us to survive. And so it thinks if we hoard all the money in the world, then we'll survive more. So don't take time to be happy. It doesn't know very much. The egoic mind is actually not very smart. It thinks it is. And we listen to, I don't have time for it. And then we choose to do it anyway. And that's a beautiful choice you've made. So now you recenter yourself, you get grateful, you've been outside, you've been connected with what's real. The egoic mind is not real. You're connected with what's real in this moment. And then you show back up to your family with your cup full and overflowing, and you're so loving and you're so present, or you show back up to work even. And you're so inspired because you're connected to what's real that you do like 10 times better work. Eventually, when the egoic mind sees that this practice actually helps you, it like chills out a little bit. It's like, all right, cool, take your time.
Yes, take your time. And that's where, I had to, the crunch of getting on here on time for this call was part of in my mind. But at the same time, I knew that I had and wanted to do that for myself, because it resets my day. It's like you're talking about when you step out of bed and you say thank you with your steps. I was literally saying that to myself with my steps out there today. Thank you. And I was picking out something I was seeing in my environment at that moment. And it wasn't every single step I took, but I was just consciously doing that over and over and over. I had a song that kept popping up in my mind, just a random song that I was like, where is that coming? So that's where the practice, I'm playing with myself going, and I question it. Where is that coming from? Why? And so then I stop it. And then I go back to my gratitude. I start thinking, I see something else, or I hear another bird, or
I have
whatever is.
I
So,
have
but
these songs play in my head
just random songs
all the time. I used to get so frustrated about it that I couldn't stop the song. You were able to stop it. Good.
in the
Now
moment, meaning it came back. It kept coming back. I couldn't get it to stop completely. It
does.
just would not stop.
It's another one of these like ahas that, I'm not actually in control of these thoughts, but the ego wants to play this radio station right now of this song. At this
The
point,
song meant nothing. It was like it was just the stupidest song in the world.
at this point, so one of the good moods is acceptance. I just let it play that radio station. I'm like, you can play that song. You can play it over and over again on repeat. I don't fight it. I'm just like, it is what it is. The song is playing in my mind. It's just like if the radio is on while I'm doing my work, I can still do everything I need to do while this song is playing. But yeah, it used to drive me crazy, these songs that would play. It's interesting, right? And this is I hope that this resonates with somebody who's been wondering about the ego and the higher self. Because if you are your thoughts, then why would you be frustrated that a song is playing that you can't stop? No, you're the one that can notice a song is playing. The mind plays songs and thinks thoughts. You just notice them and choose if you want it or don't want it. And what's cool is you're actually in control. So it's like there's a really cool analogy called the elephant and the rider. The ego is like the elephant, and it's like doing the work, right? Your body does the work. It does the thinking. And your thoughts then create your destiny. So it's like the elephant, but we're like a little rider that sits on top of the elephant and directs it where to go. The elephant's very powerful and is actually like taking us where we want to go, but we're always in control unless we're not. And if we haven't trained our elephant very well, it just goes wherever the heck it wants to go. And it's like taking us into like the jungle, and it's like really like dangerous places, and it's cold and wet there, and we don't have any protection. We're like, elephant, why'd you go here? And it doesn't listen because we haven't trained it yet. But we really actually can train this elephant. And then once we train the elephant, we go wherever we want to go with it. Sometimes it's hungry or it wants to sleep or whatever, and it tries to go here. And we're like, I'll work with you here on this. But ultimately, we're going to go over here to the right. And eventually, a trained elephant will always go where we want it to go.
And it's continuously training, right? You're always trying to train that elephant. I love that. That's great. So we talked briefly about we definitely went into the bad moods, but I'd love for you to touch on each of the good moods as well. You talked about a couple of them, but I would love for you to kind of go through that, the good moods as well, so people can have a reference of that also.
Yeah, the first good mood being humility, because it is the antidote to ego. And once we fully recognize that there's only one solution to happiness, and that's being completely humble and having humility, that's our highest and best happiness, we can fully be humble. And it's beautiful. Humility is really beautiful. There's a wonderful quote by C.S. Lewis, and it says, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And humility is saying there's a higher power. There's something like life is too magical. We're on a ball of dirt going thousands of miles per hour around a burning ball of fire in the middle of nothing, surrounded by billions upon billions of other balls of fire that are, how is this even happening? It's all so freaking crazy. And humility would say, there is a higher power that has created all of these forces, and I'm just going to be super humble to whatever it is, that I'm not actually in control of anything. This higher power is ultimately in control, and that's humility. Is I'm just going to be really humble to it. From humility, we then can start to grow authentic confidence. And this is not a egoic, prideful confidence where we're arrogant. It's more an internal confidence where we start to say, okay, I trust myself and my values. I'm going to be confident not in my external achievements. I'm going to be confident in who I am at my character, that I choose to be integrous, that I choose to be kind, that I choose to be humble. If I stick to these values, I can be very confident in who I am as a human being. And even if my results don't show up the way I wanted them to, I'm very confident internally in my own character. That's a beautiful emotion, and it's super cool. From there, we can get into responsibility. So once we fully embrace the confidence in our own character, we now can take full responsibility for everything. The ego loves to be a victim, loves it. And look, there's lots of circumstances that we're victimized for. I was just T-boned in my car. Thankfully, we weren't hurt. Again, gratitude, we weren't hurt. My car's in the shop for 5 months. I had just bought it. It's brand new. Brand new. T-boned by somebody, the tourist with their phone out, just goes straight through a stop sign. Total victim, right? I didn't do anything to create that accident. It was unavoidable. It was unavoidable. So complete victim. However, choosing to think victim thoughts will not help me. Just yesterday, I find out that her insurance company is not paying for my rental car. So not only is my brand new car in the shop for 5 months, but I was just charged $1,500 in the last 30 days for the rental car. Again, the ego wants to say, victim, how dare they? But I don't have to follow it because I'm in choosing responsibility. This is the third good mood, choosing responsibility. I have a responsibility to keep my mindset high today. It is my responsibility how I'm going to react to this news that they're not paying for my rental car. And I know that if I spiral into negativity, I won't be as great at my job today. I won't be as great of a father. I won't be as great of a husband. So my responsibility is how am I going to respond? What's the highest response to this? My highest response was to say, if they don't pay for it, they don't pay for it. If they do pay for it, great. We'll send an email to some people. And then ultimately, I'm not in control if they pay. What I am in control of is how much money I make today with a high mindset. So that's responsibility. Super easy to fall into victimhood, but it just doesn't help you ever. Let's say they never pay. Okay, I'd have to pay for it anyway. I could sue them, right? Well, ultimately, what's 1,500 times 5? I'm not like, maybe it's 6,500. I don't know. I would have to pull a calculator out.
7,500.
7,500. Great. What's $7,500 in the grand scheme of things? Nothing. I could make $7,500 today, right? So being worried about it, if they're going to pay it or not pay it, is not helpful. Okay, that's responsibility. The next great mood so once we master this humility and this internal confidence and this responsibility, we then move into acceptance. And acceptance is what I'm saying here, is that I'm just accepting I'm not in control of the outcomes. It is a wonderful mindset. You actually end up finding in acceptance that your problems were gifts. That every single problem was a gift that was sent to help you become a greater version of yourself. That I was given an opportunity to be T-boned by this person. The gift was we all were safe. And I get an opportunity to see how far I've come spiritually, to see if I can stay super high in a challenging mindset situation, right? What a gift. How blessed. And look, this is what gets super cool. I've always my whole life wanted to drive a Jeep where the top comes off. That's my rental car. And it's bright blue. It's like royal blue. And I'm a huge Detroit Lions fan. So and I'm driving everywhere and people are like, oh my God, that Jeep is so freaking cool. And I'm like, I know this Jeep is so cool. So I'm actually having a ton of fun because of this thing, right? Did it happen to harm me, or did it actually happen for me? It doesn't matter. It's how do I choose to see it? Well, I'm the one who always gets to say what happened. Did it happen to me, or did it happen for me? If I'm always saying life is happening for me, it's always happening for me, because it's my internal decision to say this is a great thing. Right now, we can't just lie to ourselves. We actually have to work on figuring out how to know that life is always happening for us. I've got an exercise in the book about that. From acceptance, we move to gratitude, which we've talked a lot about. Gratitude is the gateway to the highest three good moods. Love is the next. So once we fully accept our circumstance, we become grateful for it. We then can love it. This super easy example of being T-boned by somebody and driving the Jeep. I accepted that I was T-boned. I'm doing what I can about it. I'm now having gratitude. I get to drive this Jeep. Now I get to love my life. I'm like, oh, I actually love that I get this opportunity to drive my dream car for a little bit. And once we love our life, we open up into joy. But I want to stay with love for just a moment, because the end of the chapter on love, I talk about self-love. We can only love to the extent that we can fully love ourselves. And we have to work on this. Like, our barrier to our happiest emotions is truly just knowing how lovable we are. That's our barrier. To the extent that we can just fully embrace and love ourselves, like fully accept ourselves, fully love ourselves, and in all of our humanity, all of our struggles, all of our mistakes, all of our bad mood thoughts, the time we like raise our voice at our wife or our children, that we just know that, hey, I am truly deserving of love at all times. I actually am the one who loves me. From that place, we then can get super joyful. And joy is wonderful. We talked a lot about that. Joy is available in the present moment. And finally, we get into, if we do all of this, we can live a very peaceful life. And we could be peaceful now, not when we retire, not when we get to heaven. Heaven is actually here in this moment. Heaven, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within. It is. The kingdom of heaven is traversing these moods and getting to peace and feeling the peace of God today. It is not a place, it is an emotion.
Love that. That's a mic drop moment right there. That's awesome. So in that, yeah, that's fantastic. So that's where I struggled with this for the longest time. And so that's where I'm super grateful for this conversation, is that if folks can just catch that pass of that it's within them. It's their choices. We all have circumstances, things happening to us. But like you said, if you can flip that and it's happening for us versus to us, having the ability to respond in different ways through this framework that you've built out with the bad moods and then the good moods, it can then set you up to see life in a totally different perspective that you might not even realize that can even exist. So there again, it brings you into those last three good moods. That the last one is peace. And there was one little part about that, the peace part, that I just want to hit you with and see what your thoughts were. Because when I was reading that chapter, you talked about a story about your wife and having a situation with her where you were kind of pushing up against the limits. You called it, let me see, I have it written down here, the upper limit thermostat. And as far as how we have these upper limits of our own thinking, of our own abilities, even possibly even of loving ourselves. And we talked about, or you mentioned in the book about self-sabotage. When I was reading that, I felt like you were talking directly to me, because I struggle with that continuously, and I'm working on it, right? I'm working on it continuously as well. Help me understand that upper level thermostat, and then that whole self-sabotage pattern that brings you back into that comfort zone, let's call it. I think you had a different term in the book for it as well. But anyways, help me through that. I think folks, once again, you're going to be helping me because it's my question, but at the same time, I think folks out there that can maybe recognize that within themselves, and they have that self-sabotage where they bring themselves back. Let's talk about that just for a few minutes here as we start to bring this in for a close.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful question, Randy, because we all have an upper limit thermostat to how much joy, happiness, love, peace, and like just incredible bliss we allow ourselves to feel. We don't know we have an upper limit thermostat, but we do. And when we experience more joy, love, bliss, peace than we're comfortable with, we go past that thermostat. Let's say we're comfortable at 72 degrees and we get up to 80 degrees, like everything gets way too great. We're afraid that the other shoe is going to drop. And so rather than get surprised by another shoe hitting us in the head, we sabotage our happiness just slightly to bring us back down to 72. Because we're comfortable there. We can predict what life is going to be like. It's another ego survival tool, because the ego is always trying to control the world so that it keeps itself safe. And if we get beyond our comfort level of how much happiness we think is appropriate, we need to bring it back down into a comfort level so we can predict how the world's going to go. We don't really know how to predict how the world's going to go if everything is blissful all the time, because we've never experienced that. So the ego is really afraid of the unknown. And this is what in the book I talk about a story where my wife and I were having just a really, really harmonious, peaceful, happy period of time in our lives, more than we'd ever experienced. Everything was going well, no fighting for like sustained periods of time. The kids were all getting along. Money is great. And then we start to manufacture a problem over nothing. And I'm setting up like this beautiful night. I pick out a rom-com movie. My girls are really excited. It's like some movie where a girl turns into a princess or something like that. And not a movie I would pick. I'm doing it like to bring more peace and harmony to us and even more joy. And she's like obsessed with fixing a broken hot tub. For whatever reason, the hot tub's not heating up right. And I'm like, hey, Katie, come sit down in the movie. And she's like, hey, I'm trying to fix this broken hot tub. and I could feel myself getting kind of upset that we'd set the whole stage for this evening, and her tone was starting to get me upset. And then so I start to respond, and with my normal reaction, which is, why do you have to work on that? We're not getting in the hot tub today. This isn't, we're trying to have this great evening. And this starts to escalate. And immediately I noticed what was going on was that we had hit a switch, our upper limit switch, where we were manufacturing a problem out of nothing, because it was comfortable to have an argument at this point in time of our happiness journey, so that we could get back into our homeostasis of 72 degrees of happiness. And just knowing that, I just called her out and I said, oh my gosh, we are totally sabotaging our joy right now to get into our comfort zone, our happiness comfort zone. And we've just hit our upper limit threshold of how much peace and joy and bliss we can achieve. So let's not do it. Let's not sabotage it. Let's see if we can push through the uncomfort of how happy we've been and sustain more happiness right now without creating a drama. And she's like, oh, you're so right. We were about to just totally sabotage how great it's been over nothing. And we shrugged it off. And then what happened is now the ego sees, oh, it's actually safe to sustain happiness longer than we ever have. So we just have to push through the discomfort of this upper limit of joy just long enough to get to the point where the ego feels like it's safe to continue to be happy. It's just worried that we're going to get blindsided by another shoe. It's always worried that another shoe is going to drop. And why is it worried about that? Because other shoes have dropped in our life. And when it's blindsided, you can't get blindsided in the jungle, right? A tiger will fricking pounce on you and kill you. So it wants to try to control how everything is going so that it doesn't get surprised by something taking away its joy. So it takes away its own joy. That's what's actually going on with that upper limit threshold. And so we just have to just notice it. When it starts to happen, we're like, you just call it out. You're like, this is drama that I'm creating because I'm uncomfortable being so happy right now. So this is what I like to say about the other shoe. There is no other shoe. Both shoes are securely on my feet, and I am so happy just putting them on my feet. There's no other shoe that's ever hanging over me. No other shoe's going to drop. Life is constantly changing. That's just a fact. And as life changes, I can choose to remain happy through its changes. But it's not a shoe that's dropping on me. It's just the nature of life is to change.
So that's where this conversation today, I hope folks, so the themes that are going off in my mind is choice. We've said choice many, many, many times. We talked about just being conscious of your thoughts and having the separation between the ego and your higher self, and just really becoming aware of what those are, to the point where then you can take control. I talk a lot about it on previous episodes about triggers. I call them triggers. Same kind of thing, I think, with this upper limit thermostat, meaning once you get triggered with an emotion, thought of anger, disappointment, whatever the trigger might be, having the ability to control it. Like you said, you snapped your fingers, and it's like in the moment you catch yourself, and then you can make a different decision to be responsible for that emotion that's beginning to take over your basically your entire body, your thought process at that moment. I loved how you shared that story with us here today, but then obviously within the book as well, because that really helped me see that within myself, because that's what I'm actively trying to work on as I'm navigating my ups and downs throughout the day, right? Because we all have those. So just grateful that you shared that, and that being the last part of that book, that was like, that really hit home for me. That was really, really great. So, thanks so much. That was awesome.
Man, thank you so much. You are awesome. I'm just so proud of you and what you've created here, and the difference you're making in the world with this podcast.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm doing my best, that's for sure. So, as we start to bring this one in for a landing, I would love for you to, we've shared a ton, and I kind of just went over a little bit of an overview there just for a second, but is there anything that's on your mind, anything, whether it's from the book or an inspiration that's maybe hitting you in the moment? We talk about living in the now. Is there anything that you can share with the listeners today that can maybe share some inspiration, help them, find some more happiness in their life with all the chaos that might be going on in their exterior environment? Is there anything that's coming to mind today?
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing that really that we need is just more education. Because every single thing that we do, all of us, has one goal: to make us happy. So if we all just want to be happy, and every single action we're doing is with an ultimate aim that we'll be happy one day if we just continue to act like this, why aren't we all happy all the time? There's only one reason: we just haven't learned the tools yet. But the tools are very simple. They're accessible to all of us. Once we learn them, we're no longer ignorant to what actually makes us happy. So it's just a matter of education and then application. I talk about this every week on my podcast, The Good Mood Revolution. And so if someone is saying, hey, I want to just continue to get more tools to be happy in the moment, join us every Monday as we talk about a different aspect of what that tool looks like and how to get more happy.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. So speaking of the Good Mood Revolution, we talked about the book. We referred to the book several times. We referred to the podcast. If folks are out there saying, okay, I need to get closer to Matt, learn more from Matt, get educated from him, you talking about the simplicity of it, right? But it's one of those things that if you put it to practice, get around the right people, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with most. I think something that Jim Rohn has said many times made that phrase famous, which is something that I try to do with my own life. So you can get in proximity with folks virtually, right? People listening to us today, they're with us, even though they might not physically be with us. But if people want to get closer to you, Matt, learn more from you, more from the book, where they can find the book. Obviously, the podcast, I'm sure, is on all the different podcast platforms. But share where the best places are for people to get in contact with you and learn more about the work that you're doing out there in the world.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I freaking love Jim Rohn. I learned about him from Darren Hardy.
Me too.
Darren Hardy said, you are the 5 people you hang around most. And he said, one of my 5 people is Jim Rohn. And then he said something crazy. He said, I don't actually know Jim Rohn. I just listen to all of his CDs and I read all of his books. He's one of my 5 people, but I don't know him. I just listen to him. So yes, your 5 people can be people that you consume their content. Their voice can become so loud in your head that they are one of the 5 positive influences. That made a huge impact on me. And I said, okay, well, great. I can really now be trained by the great masters. My 5 people could be the greatest masters. So the best place to plug in is the Good Mood Revolution podcast, because we get to hang out every single week. From there, we've got different offers about how to get into a coaching program or take it further, but we can plug in for free just getting into a podcast conversation every week.
Love that. And the book will be coming out very soon. Depending on when this episode launches, will be available. If it is available at that moment, I'll make sure that I had that link in there as well. And I would
Yeah,
assume
it's
you'll be able to
available
find
for
it.
pre-order at
Is it
this
pre-order?
moment.
Okay.
Yep, on Amazon. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, go out there and grab a copy. Matt was awesome enough to share with me a digital version of it, and I went through it, and it's fantastic content. If anything we've spoke about today resonates with you, you understand, or you're recognizing that you need to take more control, right? Take more choices, or bring more of the choices back in-house, right? Your outside circumstances is really about you and your thoughts, and understanding these moods and how you can use each one of them for a positive and for a negative, right? Making different decisions out there in life. If any of that has resonated with you today, yeah, you're going to want to get the Good Mood Revolution book when it becomes available on Amazon. And like you said, hook up with him on the podcast. That's one thing I love about podcasting, is that you get to meet folks, right, at a deep level. When I was first going through my journey, I would find folks that resonated with me, and I would go as deep as I possibly could. Hopefully, maybe you're finding some value in the message that I'm bringing here on the Rich Mind podcast. I'm trying to find some fantastic guests that will speak to you in different ways, be able to have you see life maybe differently than you ever thought possible, so that way you can go out there and create the life that you were meant to have, for you, for your family, for your legacy. And that's really what I want to try to do for you here moving forward on the Rich Mind podcast. So go out there, definitely make sure you connect with Matt. We'll have all of his links in the show notes. But Matt, man, I just appreciate you spending your time with us here today. This has been such a fun conversation. I knew it would be. Yeah, we could go on and on and on. So fascinated with the subject itself that, yeah, I just appreciate you spending your time. I'm really grateful.
My man, you are the real deal. And all of your podcast listeners are so blessed to have your voice leading the way to help them be healthier, wealthier, and leave a greater legacy. Love what you stand for and what this show stands for.
Appreciate that very much. So folks, go out there, have a fantastic day. If you wouldn't mind sharing this episode with your family and friends, maybe you know of someone that could hear and use this message, right? Maybe it's something that they need at this particular moment that can help them find more happiness in their life. You can share this with them. It's as easy as just hitting that button on your phone and sharing it with them. I would greatly appreciate that. I know Matt would as well. But yeah, go out there and share and spread the message as far and as wide as you possibly can. Have a fantastic day. We appreciate your time and attention, and we look forward to coming back with you with another guest again very soon. Until then, bye now.